BizNews' favorite columnist, R.W. Johnson, always has thought-provoking information for us. But my goodness, the latest column on water, and in particular Gauteng, and how Johannesburg is dying and the national crisis this has evoked is something that, well, gives anyone in this country pause. We are talking to Mr. Johnson this morning to get some deeper insights into his column. Well, that was it was quite a piece, and to say that when we've read so many of the pieces that you have produced, which are thought-provoking, what got you into thinking about water in Johannesburg, and indeed coming to such strong conclusions that this is a national crisis?
Well, several things. One is simply contact with friends in Johannesburg, and the sort of lived experience of it from them. But also, it's always been the case that Joburg is a sort of freakish city in the sense that it's not on a river or a main water source, and that it's always been artificial in that sense. And that is coming back to bite us, there's no doubt about it. But of course, there is a much more general deterioration of infrastructure in Joburg. And, we've seen under Celia Brink an attempted reversal of fortunes in Tshwane, but there hasn't really been anything like that in Joburg. It's carry on down.
Before we talk more about Johannesburg, we had an interview yesterday. Chris Steyn spoke to Herman Mashaba, who made the statement that Johannesburg can be rescued. It's in a far better state than Tshwane. Is he just playing politics here, or is there evidence to support his view?
Well, I'm not sure what he was referring to. Is he looking at infrastructure, or is he looking at bank balances? Or, I don't know what that would be based upon.
From the context, it would be infrastructure and the governance generally of Johannesburg being better and in a better position than Tshwane. Maybe, as I say, he might have been playing politics.
I've simply no idea. I can't comment. One would have to ask him.
All right, so let's go one step further then into the national calamity, as you've described it, of where Johannesburg is going. How did it get there?
Well, ultimately, it's been under more or less uninterrupted ANC rule for the best part of 30 years. And we know what that means. It means mismanagement, it means corruption, it means not maintaining infrastructure, not investing in capital goods of any kind. And you can't keep on like that without it having these dire effects. I mean, the report on the state of bridges, with many bridges now in a very dangerous state, is just one example.
30 years is a long time, and during this period, you were also the director of the Helen Suzman Foundation. And in your column, you make reference to an attempt to put some focus on the water issues that were already then looming for Johannesburg. Tell us that story.
Well, it was very obvious that, as with electricity, a great deal of focus was going on providing more access to electricity, more access to water to people who hadn't had sufficient access before. Now, that was a very good thing. No one doubts or disputes that. But it was perfectly obvious that if you were going to do that, that you must increase supply in both electricity and water. And there was no attempt to do so. And that was really very striking. And I became calm. The HSF was headquartered in Joburg, and one was living there, and you could not but be conscious of the situation. So we wanted to hold a conference about water security in South Africa. And effectively, we were prevented from doing so by Carter, who threatened anybody working in the water industry that they would lose their jobs if they dared attend. And, he actually wrote to us and said that if there was going to be a conference, he would nominate the speakers and he would provide us with the agenda. He just didn't want any independent discussion at all. And that was just a ridiculous situation, really.
He clearly didn't have a grasp on the looming threat.
No, I don't think so. I think they were all... Look, the truth was that in the 1990s, the government under Mandela and then Mbeki was cresting along on the back of previous investment by previous governments, which meant that the state of national and provincial and municipal infrastructure was still acceptable. And that was just taken as a given, as if nothing else needed to be done. And that was the general assumption at that point. And but if you ask questions about it, it became clear no one was thinking. The Eskom demanded of Mbeki that they must do something to increase electricity supply, and they just couldn't get him to agree.
Well, why? Surely it's easy to look back now and to say, come on, guys, this was really bad news. But even at the time, why was any questioning, any rational approach to things like electricity and water just swept off the carpet by the politicians? Were they that dumb, or were they just that arrogant?
Well, they were in a very arrogant mood. Let's face it, that was the high period of, when business offered to make available skilled managers to help government, that was taken as an insult. And there was a sort of Cold War sort of freeze between government and business as a result of that offer. It was quite ridiculous. They were trying their best to help. It might have been rather ham-handed offer, but it was well meant. I think that, the government, certainly under Mbeki, was in that sort of mood. And certainly Rob Turton, who is a considerable water expert, he was forced out of the CSIR for saying the wrong thing, even though he was completely right in what he was saying.
Sounds like the whistleblowers were made into examples, and at some point in time, though, even to those who were in those castles of arrogance, they must have known that things were going to become evident to everybody, as they now are. So you wonder why they proceeded in the path that they did.
Well, one has to ask that. At the time, it was ridiculous. As I think I possibly mentioned to you before, I had a former student of mine from Oxford who had taken a job at the World Bank, and he was sent out here. And I remember he came along and said, my first impression is that the cities are all in the wrong place. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, it's like Australia. They should all be around the coast. It is quite ridiculous for the major population centers in areas where there isn't sufficient water. And I was very interested. That was the first thing that struck him about the country. And yet that wasn't the common perception.
Even today, it isn't. But we are where we are. We've had this disastrous governance in the last 30 years. What, if anything, can be done to turn the situation around on water?
Well, the problem, in a nutshell, is that as water becomes more scarce, which is happening not just in South Africa, but more generally because of climate change, that hydrological expertise and capital investment in necessary measures both become more and more essential. And we, at precisely the point when we needed more and more expertise, were getting rid of that and putting people in who had no idea about what they were doing. And that was a very disastrous thing to happen. Now, if it's all very well saying that has to be reversed, but as you know, there are real political problems about doing that. As has been pointed out, I think, in Daily Maverick, that the head of the Joburg Water Organization is a member of the Young Communist League. No experience of water engineering or anything like that. That's a perfectly normal situation, you'll find.
You do give some credit to the new Minister of Water and Sanitation, Pemi Majordina. Might she be a new broom that could sweep some goodness in?
Well, only if she can really make the municipal authorities behave, and there's no sign of that yet. The sign one needs to see is very much increased expenditure allocated for maintenance on the one hand and capital investment on the other. And until you see that, nothing's happening. Now, what is happening, of course, is exactly what happened with electricity, which is to say that those who can afford are quickly making sure that they have their own electricity and their own water. And you will find that, on the whole, the better heeled people in Joburg will have got themselves into that situation. And this is the natural human response. But of course, that leaves out the bottom 2/3 of the population. It's not a solution for everybody. That's what's going on now.
And the government of national unity should be addressing issues like this. But I was quite taken aback by the comment that you made that the leader of the country, Cyril Ramaphosa, seems to be prepared to sacrifice the government of national unity on the Bela bill, which has evoked a lot of emotion elsewhere. Unpack that for us, if you would.
Well, as things stand, he simply said, there are 3 months in which he's not going to apply certain clauses, but that will run out in December. If he then does apply them, then I don't see how the GNU can survive. It depends on, what priorities he's got. But I think the larger problem with this is that the local elites of the ANC and the EFF, who tend to control the cities of Gauteng, they have got their claws into the situation. And as you know, they benefit from this in all sorts of ways, tenders and patronage and so forth. Now, the only way in which to turn things around is to get those people away from the situation and to institute much more clean, democratic and expert management. And that is the challenge which any national government faces, is Ramaphosa willing to stand up to those local elites and say, I'm sorry, you've got to get away from the trough which you've been feeding from because you're messing everything up. It'd be a very tough thing for him to do. There's no sign that he's willing to do it, but I don't see how you can rescue the situation in Gauteng any other way.
And in Tshwane, from what you've just said now, it looks like Action SA has been played on that, because they clearly, from the way that you've described it to us, by taking over or getting rid of the one hope they seem to have with Celia Brink, Action SA is playing into the hands of this elite that have made all of the problems.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Look, it's too soon to make any firm judgments. We have to wait and see. But if they behave in Tshwane in the way that they have behaved elsewhere in Gauteng, then there will be a deterioration of the situation, and no doubt about it. But it'll be easy to see, Alec. You just have to look at the budgets. And Bernstein's right about that. If you read the budget, you really know what people are serious about. And if they're serious, there will be huge increase in expenditure on maintenance and on capital investment, which means, of course, that you can't keep on taking on more staff or paying them more and more money, which is what's going on at the moment.
It's all in the numbers, and you, as you say, you can assess and analyze that. But what if you lived in Johannesburg today, or you have people from Johannesburg saying to you, Bill, I'm worried when I read what you're writing. It makes sense to me. But what can I do to fix this?
Well, of course, the individual will try to become more self-sufficient. And that is what is happening, as I say. And there will be a great scramble, just like there were with solar panels with electricity. And that is going on with water as we speak. But as we can see, we've seen in other parts of the country as well, that the problem is that you pretty quickly get a sort of water mafia controlling water tankers, exploiting the situation. And for the bottom two-thirds of the population, that's actually the option.
But that must surely lead to social unrest in time.
I think so. And before that, it probably leads to some fairly explosive results in the municipal elections too.
Results in which way?
Well, we don't know yet because we're still in the honeymoon period of the GNU. And the last polling information we had was that this was good for both the ANC and the DA. But it remains to be seen. I think if the municipal situation in Gauteng continues to deteriorate, then it would be very surprising if the ANC and possibly the EFF both lose votes again.
Now, you have been observing political players for a long, long time. Panyaza Lesufi, the local ANC boss in Gauteng, is an interesting fellow. Do you think that he has the strength to A, continue resisting Ramaphosa, and B, possibly even replacing or succeeding Ramaphosa, which is his supposed aim?
Well, I think, whether he's able to stand up. I mean, Ramaphosa at the moment doesn't appear to be exercising very much pressure against him or try to make him behave in a different way. So I don't know how much he needs to stand up against that. But I would have thought the problem for the Sufi is simply that he may have ambitions of his own. I'm sure he does. But Paul Mashatile is ahead of him in the queue. And I think that, the maximum ambition the Sufi could have would be to be deputy president. And I doubt whether you'll get two people from the same province.
And the role of the others in the area, and particularly, for instance, you do make mention of AfriForum.
Well, AfriForum have said that, they want the Sufi out. They obviously have issues with him over education as well as other things. But they are a formidable self-help organization, as we know. They have a very large membership, which they're able to mobilize. And I'm sure that on the water issue, they will do that. I think that, in the field of voluntary association, they are by far the strongest element there is in that situation. And really, the government ought to be cooperating with them because they can actually help. And they have done a lot of good work in their own area.
So it's a little bit like where we started off. There were offers of assistance, or there are offers of assistance coming in. But once again, those who could take the assistance or could take that offer of friendship are rejecting it. Is there something deeper there, or do we just simply assume that it's because of the arrogance of those who are governing?
Well, I think that, from the point of view of the Sufi, he's been fighting against them for years, basically, and there's a lot of bad blood between them. I doubt that he sees it as an opportunity, which it is. I mean, if he had any sense, he would be getting together with AfriForum and saying, what can we do about the water crisis?
R.W. Johnson, columnist and former Oxford University professor, and I'm Alec Hogg from BizNews.com.